Hello, amazing artists! Today I'm going to be teaching you how to make your own weaving loom. Of course, you could go to the store and buy a weaving loom, but you really don't need to. To make your own, all you need is a piece of cardboard, some scissors, and some yarn. Cut your cardboard down to the size you'd like your weaving to be when you're finished with it. I would suggest that you start with a rather small weaving loom. Mine is about 6 inches wide. Next, you're going to use a ruler to mark some measurements across the top of your cardboard weaving loom. I'm making a mark every 1/2 inch. So in between every number, there's a longer line, and that's the 1/2 inch line. I'm just marking on every number and then every 1/2 inch between that number. Do that on both sides so that you end up with 1/2 inch marks on both sides of your cardboard. In a moment, you're going to cut little notches into the cardboard, and these are the lines where you'll cut. I decided to make lines connecting the last lines that I drew because I thought if I made notches at that point, the cardboard might break. So I just did that to show myself where the edges are. I'm using cardboard scissors, but you can use any kinds of scissors because you're just making small cuts in your cardboard. So go along each one, and that's where you're going to warp your yarn through. That's it, you just made your own weaving loom. Congratulations! The next step is called warping your weaving loom. The strings that go across the weaving loom are called your warp strings. Let's pause for just a moment and notice the tools I have here. Yarn, masking tape, and a Sharpie. That's it! I put the yarn through the first notch on my weaving loom and tape it to the back. On the tape, write your name. This way, once you start a weaving, we know who it belongs to and it doesn't get confused with someone else's. Then I'm going to flip my loom over and pull that warp string straight across to the notch that's across from it. Now wrap the yarn around that notch and put it through the next door neighbor notch. Pull the yarn straight across into the next free notch. Wrap it around, bring it back to the front, and go across again. Are you beginning to notice a pattern? I go across, around the notch, and into the next door neighbor notch. Across, around the notch, and into the next door neighbor notch. Across, around the notch, and into the next door neighbor notch. You are going to be so great at this. Okay, so I've arrived at the last notch. Flip over the weaving loom, and you're going to trim your yarn and then tape it down. What I want you to notice is that there's no warp strings going across the back. Kind of looks like a running stitch on either side of the weaving loom. You did it! You're ready to start weaving. Choose the first color that you'd like to weave with. Hold one end of the yarn in one hand and stretch it all the way across your body. This measurement is about 1 yard, and it's a really nice, manageable amount of yarn to weave with. Trim it off and put your yarn away in the Fiber Art Center. Please make sure you leave it nice and tidy. If you don't remember how to thread a needle, I'm going to give you a very quick reminder. So I've got my yarn needle from the Fiber Art Center. I've got my 1 yard of yarn. This yarn is called the weft, the one I'm actually going to weave with. And I brought over a little piece of paper. I'm going to use some scissors and trim down a skinny piece of paper. It needs to be narrow enough to fit through the eye of your needle. Fold it in half. Put one end of your yarn through the paper. Give it a little pinch, and then put the whole thing through the eye of your needle. Isn't that easy? So cool! You don't need to tie a knot in your yarn, just pull the short end a little bit so that it doesn't slip out of your needle. To begin weaving, put the tail end of your yarn through the first warp string. You're going to tie your purple yarn, or whatever color you're using, onto your weaving warp string. Make a little loop, knot, and you're going to do it again. So I cross over the short end, make a little loop, so it's kind of like an X. I'm going to put that loop around the back and through the circle. Now I've got a double knot and I'm ready to weave. Now comes the fun and easy part. I'm going to go over, under, over, under. Guess what comes next? Over, under, over, under, over. And then I pull that yarn all the way through. Use your fingers or a comb to tap the yarn down to the edge, so it makes this straight line at the bottom. Then, since I last went over, I'm going to begin this way by going under, over, under, over, under, over. Do you notice that this is a pattern? Weaving is all about patterns. Pull that yarn all the way through and tap it down with your fingers. So try not to pull it so tight that it pulls your warp string over. You don't want to do that. If you notice that happening, try to loosen up your weaving just a little bit and then tap it down with your fingers. Continue the over, under pattern, making sure that you pull your yarn through each time, but not too tight, and tap it down with your fingers. You got this. Now here's a pro tip. If you take a ruler and you put it over and under your warp strings across your weaving loom, you can hold it up and it creates something called a shed. This is an easy space to pass your needle through when you're going in one direction. So when I go in this direction, I can just pass it in through the shed, and then I put my ruler. Then I'm going to flatten my ruler so the shed space goes away. Now I have to notice that the yarn was going over the last warp string. So in this direction, I'm going to begin by going under, over with a normal weave. I continue weaving, going through the shed in one direction and doing my normal under, over, or over, under pattern in the other direction. Now, as you can see, I'm almost out of yarn, so I went ahead and took my yarn off of the needle, and I'm ready to either change colors or tie on another piece of yarn that's the same color. I'm going to change colors. You're going to tie them together by holding the two tails together, wrapping them around your fingers, and then pulling them through the loop or the little hole that you created. Then you just pull it tight and you're ready to keep weaving. You can't see it in this video, but I measured 1 yard of gray yarn. Use a paper needle threader anytime you need to thread your needle with a new color of yarn. Weaving is a special kind of fiber arts that looks so beautiful. You won't be able to finish a weaving in one class, so at the end of the class, you can wrap your extra yarn around your weaving loom so it will be ready to go for next time. I can't wait to see what you create in the Fiber Arts Center. Have fun, artists!